All right. Let's talk about wrist locks. All right. I had been familiarized with the idea of wrist locks in high school, having some instruction in them in karate, right? Mostly from Jeff Mack, who taught the Goju Daote Karate Do system, right? Of which I'm the only remaining, not just black belt, but master in, right? As in master's rank. You could argue, well, yeah, who masters anything? Although I feel like many people are being very disingenuous, right? There is an actual styles have an actual master's rank and a master's requirement. You have to work for it. You have to test for it. You have to face a panel for it, and you have to meet certain standards. And then you are allowed to teach at a master's level. You're allowed to teach teachers. You're allowed to teach black belts. You're allowed to teach advanced concepts, which you have gained a degree of mastery over. It's like if a PhD said, "Well, I'm not really a PhD. I don't know anything." I'd be like, "Well, why did your PhD program suck? Like, you got a PhD, but you're not a PhD." Well, I don't want to use the title. I'm like, well, then why did they give out these titles, right? I feel like there's a little bit of false modesty out there, and if you want to be modest, I think the best expression of modesty in martial arts is: do you still keep practicing? Do you still hone basic techniques? Do you I'm not saying the guys that have like Master and Master Blaster and Super Grandmaster and Professor Master Grandmaster on their uniform and on their belt or sash, and welcome to Grandmaster Grand Poobah Supermaster's School of Mastery, right? It's a form of masturbation, right? But if you're a legitimate master, like my master's test, okay, was with the late Ed Youngsa, and we fought full contact, right? I knew all the kicks. I knew all the forms. We both got our black belts from Jeff Mack. He took over. Jeff Mack stopped teaching, and when I came for my advanced ranks, I tested with Ed Youngsa, and we fought full contact. There's a video of it somewhere, which I would love to have and post on the internet. All right, but that's another story. It'll probably never happen. So, mastery, right? I got a little distracted, but let's get back to the main topic because I wanted to talk about wrist locks, right? At the time, I had black belts in Taekwondo and Karate. I had a first degree black belt in the ATA under John Alfred Schwabler, and I had the late Grandmaster A. Ju Lee's personal signature on my black belt certificate. Still have it with me to this day, 1991, right? And I had, I think at the time at least a second degree black belt in Goju Daote Karate Do, and I had transitioned to Kung Fu, right? Trained with two different teachers. Not counting the brief dalliances with JKD and seminars and cross-training with people. And at the time, I had finished Mercer County Community College, so it was at least 97, at least 96, 97, and possibly 98. And I was in my undergraduate years, and I was training every martial art I could find on campus. We had these clubs where you paid nothing, or maybe like $5 at the beginning of a semester. You got to take courses, jiu-jitsu courses. There was karate, there was taekwondo. The only club that I found really worth my time was the Filipino Martial Arts Club, and I thought that was cool. I was just having a lot of fun with that. And but there were Kung Fu, I called them the Kung Fu kids. There was one guy who was kind of a self-taught monkey Kung Fu guy, but he was just so skilled and so acrobatic, and he imitated every form. He'd buy the Kung Fu movies and be able to perfectly replicate the beginning forms in Iron Monkey and Monkey in the Eagle's Shadow and do them perfectly. So, he was about 175 pounds, African American kid with dreadlocks who could move like Chen Cao Chung. Like, he could move like a young, agile Chen Cao Chung. He made himself able to do it. And work out with them. I had a friend of mine, John Schrayer. If you're watching this, hey man, thanks so much for cross-training in your Huashan long fist system with me. And I remember I was definitely helping you out with your free sparring and stuff like that. We were having a good old time. And then I had ordered a videotape on Shaolin Kung Fu, and I was waiting outside the lower deck of my apartment. I was on the second floor, and the lower part was next to businesses and the street, College Avenue, right? And there was a guy out there waiting, and he's like, "Hey man, how you doing?" And I was like stretching my foot on the handrail. I'm like, "Hey man, I'm cool. I'm just waiting for this one video to arrive." And he's like, "What are you getting, porn?" I'm like, "No, it's Kung Fu." He's like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, it's like on Shaolin Kung Fu, the Shaolin monks." He's like, "Oh, that sounds cool. I got a friend, he does all kinds of martial arts. He does like ninjutsu and stuff." And I'm like, "Ninjutsu? Where?" And he's like, "Well, it's this like warehouse," and he described where it was, and I'm like, "I gotta get me some of that." So I went there and I learned. It was a private kind of dojo, but I wormed my way in, and I was like, this is kind of cool, because they had a Shorin no Tora class, which is a style you see in New Jersey, which is a blend of Shaolin and Shorin Ryu, right? And then the master, Master Arnold, he was a 5th degree black belt. I said, "So you're a master?" He's like, "I am no master." And I keep thinking, well then, why are you teaching? Like, why do you put on a 5th degree black belt? But I didn't say anything. Master Arnold, their system, you could learn Kenjutsu and Aikijujutsu. So the way it worked out was, first you would do the karate, and then you could qualify to learn Aikijujutsu, and then when you got a yellow belt, you could, after the Aikijujutsu class would be a sword class, right? Kenjutsu. And, it definitely wasn't Aikido. It was definitely a little more combative, but very kind of formal and prearranged in the attacks. There was no randori, right? And they were constantly, like, denigrating Aikido, but I'm like, they got randori, right? And, again, I demonstrated my skill, and I told the teacher, he's like, "Do you want to cross-train?" I'm like, "Sure." So I began cross-training with him. I taught him some of the Kung Fu I knew, and the senior student, Tommy Damash, this Hungarian guy. And I started picking up, their katas, or sets, were a series of 4 sets that took you from white all the way to black belt. And each set involved a certain number of throws, locks, techniques, takedowns. They included atemi, and it would be done in a kneeling fashion, then against grabs, then against punches, and then a few against weapons, right? There were no kick defenses that I can remember, although there might have been at the higher levels. I began practicing the first 2 right away, and I later obtained a video of the entire system, white to black belt. But it's in New Jersey and may well be unviewable by now. I really wish I could go back and get a hold of some of my stuff. They were really big on wristlock takedowns, right? And it was really fun doing it. I remember having so much fun and so much pain. Now you've got your wrist lock like this, right? Kotagash. There's one like this, right? Where instead of grabbing and taking, you reach across and you've got the person, bang. And it's surprisingly painful and jarring, okay? surprisingly painful and jarring. And we would practice it pretty much against the lapel grab or wrist grab, and then kind of a step through punch, right? And maybe a club swing or a knife swing. But nothing like dynamic and live in terms of practice. However, I would visit my home Kung Fu club in Ewing, New Jersey, right? And remember, I was there for a workout, and we have this big guy. I can't even remember his name. It might have been Brian or something. Big, huge guy. He was like a big black Buddha, but, you know, if Buddha was a wrestler who kind of got out of shape, real thick arms, you know, thick legs, he'd done lots of lifting, and he was like, the secret is, man, is pork and potatoes, man. You want to get big, you don't need no you don't need no steroids. He would stutter, just get some pork and potatoes and lift some big weights. All right, Andre, that was his name, Andre. All right, Andre, I'm with you, right? So he sees me, and he's playful. He's got a wrestling background. He's like, hey, buddy. And he's trying to like wrestle with me, right? He'd love to do that. He'd love to grab you and take you down and pin you or just lift you in the air and just kind of show, you know, how strong he was, right? So he wasn't the best kicker. He wasn't the fastest mover. He could cave you in with a punch, and if he got a hold of you, it was bad news. So he reaches out to get me like he's going to shoot in. And I remember I got him like that, and boom, he drops to his knees. And I'm like, all right, I have a big man in my hand. I don't know what to do. Like, I didn't expect this technique to work that well. I was just going to try to get him off me. And he's trying to reach over to, you know, free his hand, and I'm like, I cranked him down. I put him on his face, right? And he's kind of looking at me. I let him go. I'm like, hey, Andre, long time no see. So, what was that? I'm like, that's Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, right? And I remember he was always saying, he go over like this, can you show me that? Some of that? I'm like, I'm not, Andre, no, not now. We're at Kung Fu. And I was thinking to myself, I am not going to show him this stuff because he's going to go out and break someone's wrist. Sure enough, later, all right, I'm revisiting that class. It was at the Jewish Community Center in Ewing Township, and the head instructor was teaching an eagle claw technique, which is very similar. You know, instead of this, it's a reversed wrist lock. Not this one, an eagle claw technique. But when you turned it around and pinned it with a claw, you would draw your palm back, and you're supposed to hit and break that wrist. Pow! And we would make that motion. And sure enough, a little bit later, Andre was at one of his jobs where he's bouncing, and he's trying to restrain someone, right? And he twists him around, and I actually think what happened was, if he would have just taken them down to the ground, he could have completely controlled them. But he kind of has a bloodlust, and he wanted to break that wrist. He wanted to see what that would feel like. And he drew back to palm, and because he still had a live person in his hand that hadn't been pinned down, because the technique was taught standing up. I think the flaw in the technique is that person should be completely pinned before you attempt to break. And actually that technique shouldn't be taught to certain people, because in modern times, if you have somebody completely pinned, you're not justified in breaking that hand. So he went to go break it, and that person, they yanked their hand out, and I think he began punching. That's what I heard. So that's a technique you see in Aikido, in China, Chinese version of Jiu-Jitsu, definitely in Eagle Claw Kung Fu, definitely in Mantis, right? And certainly in Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, things like that, and even a little bit in Judo, right? So, again, Andre is a little bit under 6 foot tall, okay? He's about 300 pounds, if not more. He's got arms and legs like tree trunks, and he's quite strong. And, he went in to basically grip fight. And I shut down the grip fight. And I'd only been learning that technique. I'd only had instruction in that technique maybe for a couple months, right? So I would say a trained person who trains in jiu-jitsu like that, Japanese style jiu-jitsu, or a Chinna system, and then cross-trains in an actual grappling only system to learn how to insert those techniques against resistance would have tremendous impact on a trained, strong grappler. Okay? And there's a reason why wrist locks are not allowed in competitive jiu-jitsu, I think, until you get the black belt, because they're hard to control and you can for sure cause injuries. All right. You have a good night.